And guess what? You're with Carrie and Rochelle today for Email Etiquette for the Business Professional, Session 2. I know that Rochelle left us with a little bit of, I don't want to say homework. You know, I have a daughter who's in grade 6. Her teacher doesn't call it homework. He calls it practice. So I know that Rochelle left us with a little bit of practice. I'm sure we'll discuss that and a million other things. I just wanted to remind you how lucky we are to have Rochelle. She is the business professional and is continuing to present us with her amazingness in her skills, her talents, her stories, and of course, the knowledge that she brings with us. Rochelle is a well-educated woman working on her master's in leadership. And so thankfully for us, she brings all of that with us and is super generous in sharing all that she knows. And so as I'm going to call her in, guys, in just a moment. She's waiting in the wings. And let's use our emojis. You guys know where they are. They're at the top of the screen there. Give her a little clap emoji. Rochelle loves the clap emoji. And you guys know that I want to know where you're joining from. Any 500 points. Rochelle, you get 5 points because you should have known that already. Anyway, we're with Workplaces Education Manitoba, helping people to develop essential skills needed for work, learning, and life. And guess what? Yes, you will hear this every single time you have a session with us because it's important for us as the workers at WEM to connect what we do with our mission. And I hope that you're able to do the same in your workplaces as well. Look at those vision, mission, and values and connect with what you do to those things. Also, a big fat thank you to Employment and Social Development Canada and Manitoba Education and Training. This project was jointly funded through Human Resources, Skills Development Canada, and Entrepreneurship Training and Trade. For more information, we have the mothership website there, wem.mb.ca, or if you prefer to have a little, I don't know, email back and forth, you can contact info@wem.mb.ca. As a reminder, our vision, big scope here, guys, is that all Manitobans have access to the essential skills, knowledge, and training required to determine and pursue their goals related to learning, the workplace, and life. 9 essential skills. What are they, right? We talk about them all the time. I was going to speak French there. I don't know. Do you guys ever have that when you know a different language? Sometimes these dichos, these phrases come in. So our 9 essential skills identified as reading, document use, numeracy, writing, oral communication, working with others, thinking, digital technology, and continuous learning. Writing is very obvious when we're talking about email and etiquette in the professional world. But if you look at this list, there are a few others we're hitting on, right? Reading, oftentimes we're also using documents within our emailing. Communication, not necessarily oral, but written communication, and definitely working with others, thinking, and digital technology, because guess what? We email with technology. So amazing, and thank you for being here, because you are already hitting on number 9, which is continuous learning. So Rochelle, I'd love to bring you in. Give us an overview where we're headed today. Where are you taking us on our journey here in session 2 of Email Land? And yes, so, as a reminder, as Rochelle's hopping in, grab the handout, okay? Rochelle's popped it into the top of the chat here. Go ahead, grab that handout and use it as a resource. Come back to it. Rochelle?
Well, hey, thanks, Carrie. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your Tuesday morning with us. How honored are we that you do your training Tuesday? But even more than how honored are we, how fortunate are your colleagues, because you are strengthening your writing skills, your communication skills, and you're getting yourself to the place where you're offering them the full package of good, solid communication. Whether they even know they're getting it or not, you're setting the example in your workplace. So I just want to give you those 10,000 points for joining us today. And let's do a quick overview of session 2. We're going to sing the song of proofreading, and we're going to sing it and sing it and sing it till we have it memorized, because that's probably the best thing we could do to strengthen our writing skills. Emoji, if you were with us this morning as we talked about business writing techniques in our Tuesday tidbit, we had a 10 o'clock tidbit. Were any of you there this morning in that one too? Awesome. I'm so encouraged to see that because this workshop directly connects to that workshop, right? We're talking about writing skills as they relate to email specifically. So this is a huge tip because this was not mentioned in this morning's workshop. Email is the place you will most use your writing skills in the workplace. So email is actually the place you get measured on your communication skills and your professional presence. So don't be scared of that. You may have colleagues like, Carrie and I, for example, in planning today's webinar, I could easily just email her a quick update. I could say, hey, Carrie, here's the PowerPoint for today. Attach a PowerPoint, off it goes. So not every single email has to be heavy, technical. You can have some collegiality with your closest peers that you work with, but recognizing that beyond that little circle over small projects and minor communication pieces, beyond that, it certainly affects your credibility on how your writing skills are and your proofreading skills. So we will go through a whole series of tips and tricks to put in. We'll talk a little bit about attachments. And we do also want to talk about crises and emergencies. And this is something we actually teach in an ongoing manner, but it's becoming very real to our current climate we live in. So it's something we definitely want to pay attention to. So that sounds exciting for all of us who want to dig in and learn more. This was that horrible, messy email I sent you in your work packages last time, and we thought we can do better than this, right? So I'll just show you one concept on how to do better with it would be to look at this red text. So how can we strengthen the subject line? Well, welcome back is sort of implied just because we're going to write to someone after they're back. So we don't need that in the subject line. Instead, we could get it really focused for our colleague and say, this email is about the presentation to the board of directors. Maybe my warm opening greeting could be the welcome back cat. So showing that friendship at the office in a warm greeting. And then I could eliminate all of that blue text and just replace it with one question. Meeting's coming up. When could we meet to prepare? Here's what I want to meet about. Summarize it in a bullet form, and then even propose a time to meet. So that's one example. I want to show you another one, and I do want to thank you for those who have sent in their homework, or I love that Carrie called it practice. That practice we did could feel silly to you, but it's such a strong skill to be able to do because you took someone else's content and you edited it and did something with it. And usually when we're detached and we look at someone else's work, we have a really strong eye of scrutiny to be able to see what could be strengthened. So this is one example of homework that came in. Now, one thing I didn't do is ask if I should say who it is. So if you want to say it was you, you go ahead and put that in the chat and say this was mine. But I don't want to embarrass you if you don't want me to say your name. But with permission, I was able to share this homework that came in. Okay, good. Yay, Annie. So 10,000 points to Annie because this is what hers looked like. I liked that she had the warm greeting, and it's interesting because an exclamation mark can be the key to warmth. Who knew that that little symbol right there could be the thing to make someone feel optimistic, happy, included, but it's true. And then I have included some thoughts and concerns about the upcoming board presentation, and boom, 3 points. I love that it's just 3 easy points. In fact, if there were 4 points, I might even try to make it 3 and then slip in that 4th point in our face-to-face meeting because 3 is just a great working number to work on. And then can we arrange a phone or in-person meeting to review in the next day or 2? So I love that Annie's call to action is measurable. It says we need to meet and we need to meet in the next 48 hours. But she's written it in a friendly way. So she said, can we arrange this? And there's a deadline attached. But imagine if Annie would have said, we need to meet within the next 48 hours. That phrase sounds almost scary, doesn't it? Like I'm holding a gun to your head telling you we better review this. So the way Annie phrased it, it gets down to business and yet it's cheery and it's organized in a logical, sequential way, and she didn't forget her greeting. How about, let's applaud emoji her, let's put something in the chat. Way to go. I'm really, really thankful for that work. Thank you for your contributions, Annie. Might even just keep that in here and share it with the next group. So thank you for doing that. Remember last week we looked at the writing process and we looked at it as a 3-part process. So there's the concept of planning and organizing, there's the concept of actually writing, and then the third piece is the revising and the proofreading. Now, last session, we were able to dig into the planning and organizing, and so we looked at asking these questions over on the left about what is going into this? What's the context I need to understand about who my reader is? What is their context, and what's the impression that's going to be given about my company or myself? And then we looked at how to identify being appropriate to the particular audience. So we dug into that and we examined the who, what, whys of sending the email. Now we also took a peek at the writing process and we identified that generally speaking, business communication opens, has the necessary information, and then has a close. Now, because this workshop is about email, this is pretty much true about all of our email correspondence. If we were talking about broader workplace documents like manuals and reports, we might modify the writing process just a little bit to accommodate different types of writing practices. But as it relates to email, this is all you need. Have I given an appropriate opening? That includes your subject line. Does my body or my main content in an essay, we would look at that main content. Do I have the outline, and do my paragraphs match the thoughts? And then of course the closing. Is it appropriate to the person receiving it? And is there a specific ask? Do they need to respond? Is this for information only? Do I need it back by a certain time, or do I just want to give a friendly goodbye? With those things under our belt, parts 1 and 2, it brings us into the best part, the revising and the proofreading. This is like the least fun, like thumbs down emoji. This is the least fun part of it. This is the part that you have to be awake, you have to be on. It stinks and it's not as fun because we feel like the job's done when we've finished the writing. Right? Even the idea of including a closing, saying, best regards, Rochelle. That seems like we've finished something. I might submit to you to never put your closing on your emails until you've done step 3, because mentally you just need the space to be able to go back to an unfinished email and do the revising and proofreading. We can't underestimate the time that it takes. Sometimes the revising should happen the next day. Actually, one of my colleagues sent me an email yesterday that involves proofreading. She asked, could you proofread this and tell me if this is correct? Well, because it was like technical and there were numbers, and I opened it this morning to read it and I thought, oh, I should do that. And then I realized, you know what? Not only do I have to proofread my own work, in her asking me to proofread, essentially I'm going to go through what she wrote, do the proofreading, then I'm going to pause, and I'm going to proofread everything I put into her document. So I'm like double proofing. That's a lot of pressure. Now I know Carrie's listening and probably Mel's listening, and don't feel sad for me. I'm not saying that this is a sad thing. What I'm trying to point out is that the proofreading and revision step is the important step that you need to do when you have more than 30 seconds to do it and when you can actually focus on the task. This is the part that will absolutely affect your reputation and your effectiveness. Great slide, right? Great picture. Notice how sentence number 1 does not have the handy little comma in there. So that means we should eat grandma. But sentence number 2, with that little comma, completely changes the meaning of the phrase. So recognizing that proofing is where we catch not just errors, but where we catch messaging themes. So did what we write accurately reflect what the reader is going to hear? Remember we talked last week about shared understanding? That's the goal, is always shared understanding. So knowing that that's what we're after, we want to make sure that in the proofing stage, we've identified with our reader and we've seen it from their perspective. Imagine that 3/4 of the people you interact with are judging you based on how you spell. Now, I don't mind spelling. It doesn't scare me. I kind of find it fascinating. But I find this stat kind of staggering, that 3/4 of the people you work with are going to make some kind of judgment on you based on your spelling ability. And I particularly feel for children these days who don't even learn the same rigorous spelling things that some of us old folks had to do back in the day. So thankfully we have tips and tricks for that. But I just want to highlight this to you because we cannot underestimate how if we wrote "let's eat grandma," that could undermine an opportunity or a relationship a little past what we want it to undermine. Now, this is a cool little tool for you. It's not going to say how smart you are. This isn't to like erode your confidence, this test, as it were. This is actually just about giving you something interesting to do. Now, let me see if I can just grab this for you, and I'm going to put that into the chat because it would be a fun little thing for you to try later on. It does have words in there that you don't use in your day-to-day, and of course it's from the UK, so there's that. But I thought this is just a great idea for us to even Google this concept, because maybe we can just strengthen our skills along the way and make sure we're doing these checkups, just like we do a blood pressure check. How are we doing with our spelling check? Are we doing a check-in on that? Now, they say that through the years, you lose things like balance and muscle mass unless you practice them and do that. And the same thing has to do with mental maps. We have to be able to practice and keep these things fresh so that they're within our reach when we go to reach for them. Don't you just love the people who get to do the marketing or the communication and it doesn't pass any spell check? I'll give you a second to read that. Shoot me an emoji when you can see what's wrong with that. Right? The sign assumes people are dead. They don't exist. So this is a great example. Spell check would not catch this, because existing is a word that actually exists. So if you just solely relied on spell check and then you sent this off to the printer, they would print this sign for you. I can't even imagine how much it costs to hang up a sign like that. Hopefully you have a better printer and they would catch it too. But man, the struggle's real. How about this one? Show me an emoji when you see it. So funny. I love the spoofy signs. They're so insane. In this case, it's actually a newscast. So imagine being the journalist who's there with this journalist reputation they're trying to uphold to be articulate and accurate. And yet whoever prepared the sign for you misspelled the word "to." And actually, that's one of the words you should put on your personal list. The TOO version of "to" is commonly misspelled as just TO. So making sure that that's one of the ones you understand, because it's so commonly used in our business speak. So this sort of outlines for us why on earth these things even matter. Now, in your workbook that you have today, this is touched on a bit on page 5, and it's helpful to understand that these revision practices we do, they matter. There's a reason why we do it. There's all kinds of tools you can use. And there is a little spot in your workbook on page 6 that invites you to think about what's used in your workplace. Now, the reason that's in there is because you may have tools available to you that you don't even know you have. So you know you have spell check, right? You know you have the grammar check. Maybe some of you use Grammarly. Maybe you're using these digital tools. And maybe you have an admin assistant and they're the second eyes to see things. Or maybe you have a supervisor and they need to approve things before they go out. I want to tell you about a friend I had named Mary Ann. So Mary Ann was the registrar at a university I worked at. And Mary Ann, like sweetest lady in the world. Amazing thing about Mary Ann is she had an absolute eagle eye as it related to words, grammar, indentations. If there was something off by like one letter indented, she could see it like that. So Mary Ann's job as a registrar, that skill suited her well because a registrar is dealing with transcripts and accurate records and reporting. So great, she's a great fit for that. But what was so phenomenal about Mary Ann is she would even voluntarily take a look at the company's policy manuals or communication that came out, or if a new policy was implemented and sent out to everyone by email, let's say, Mary Ann would go through that and proofread it and bring it back to you and let you know if there were any weaknesses in it. Now, in our department, we got smart enough to do that with Mary Ann before we sent the information out. Other departments, not so smart. They sent out their communique and they would get back a response from Mary Ann unsolicited. And they didn't understand. She was actually helping. She was helpful. They thought she was just nitpicky. But it was like phenomenal. We were in this institution with academics and Mary Ann could find the one thing that nobody else could see. So as you explore ways to proofread in your workplace, I encourage you to think about colleagues even that you work with, and maybe they're not even in your office. Maybe they're an industry contact that you have, that when it comes time for the real serious writing to happen, maybe that's a person resource that can use that would be a heck of a lot stronger than spell check. Now, I'm not going to ask how many of us are working from home. But really, this is kind of the reality, right? In fact, I have a shirt for wearing around home. This is like way too much information, but I have my shirt for when I'm cleaning the house, and it says messy bun, get things done. And it's just the reality, right? You throw your hair back, you put on your comfy clothes, and you get things done. But how can you make sure that you are switching into the right mode at the right time, being the true professional self that you're trying to be? More often than not, it comes down to proofreading more than even the writing. You could offer less writing, less strength in all the word choices, but if you have immaculate proofreading, it'll be stronger than those who use strong word formation. So here's some practical tips, and jot these down in your notebook. Read it out loud. We talked about that in our webinar this morning. That's the number one best thing you can do. Read it backwards. So I don't mean literally right to left where sentences don't work. I mean read a whole sentence at a time, and in that thought and sentence, work on each word backwards. So you're not seeing them as a sentence, because often what happens is you speed read a phrase, but if you read it backwards, you actually look at each word separately. Similarly, you can do that with a whole document. You could start at the bottom and work your way up, and that way you're taking yourself out of the blind eye, and instead you get to read it the other way. Annie, I love your comment. You are 100,000,000% right. Anytime you can wait and do it overnight, it's phenomenal. And if you can't wait and do it overnight, do something else. So let's take an example. We're talking about emails here today. Imagine you've written a technical, detailed email, and you think you've proofread it, but it's really important. Well, you can't wait till tomorrow. So before you hit send, go close your office door and do 10 sit-ups. Go outside, walk around the building. Go make yourself a cup of coffee. Pick up the phone, make a phone call, use verbal processing skills instead of reading skills. Don't do something on your computer. Step away from that, get your mind focused on something else, and then come back 5 minutes later even, and read the document again out loud. It's phenomenal how that mental break can just wake up your eyes so that you can see what's on your page. Spell check and online tools, Grammarly would be a popular one people like. Putting yourself in the reader's shoes, this is not just empathy. This is like writing empathy. It's understanding what time of day are they going to get this email and what's that going to do for them. With the topic at hand, is it going to set off any defensive alarm bells for them? I need to get into their shoes and figure out how they're going to feel and why they're even getting this. Did they initiate it or did I initiate it? And once I'm there and I've realized my language is shaped well, definitely get that helpful eye. And even if it's someone standing at your desk, emails can be tricky. Like, I work with 3 different email programs and I really hate one of them because one of them collapses all my emails into a thread, and it's hard to actually discern what the latest one is if you didn't change the subject line. So I've oofed and responded to the wrong one before. So on this piece, instead of just forwarding the email to someone else and saying, can you proofread this? Maybe just have them stand at your desk and read it from that perspective, so you just don't lose track of where your emails all went. And then other tips and tricks you have, and if you have any of them, as I keep moving along, throw your tips and tricks into the chat. Let's be strengthened by the community that we are today. Now, we want to focus on strong writing techniques. So what's the difference between being a weak writer and a strong writer? Well, let's look at poor subject lines and better subject lines. So here, if we look on the left, trade show, that as a subject line alone, weak is all get out, lazy actually. How about a subject line that says, I need you to do something? That's essentially what that says. Staff meeting, well, that could mean anything. A staff meeting that happened in the past, a staff meeting for the future, an additional staff meeting that I didn't already have in my calendar. I don't know what that means. So check out the subject line. Rescheduling staff meeting to this time. That is like a gift of a subject line. I feel like that has a big red bow on it. And it's like, here is my gift to you, because even if you don't open this email, I've given you the important facts. And stuff and such. Oh, that's the worst subject line. Absolutely. Parking permits. What the heck does that mean? That doesn't even seem important to open up. I have my parking permit, so why do I even need to open this email? It probably isn't for me. But check out the improved subject line. That's leading me to believe there has been a change and there's going to be some kind of action required. So if your recipients have 10,000 emails in their inbox, like people who should remain nameless in today's webinar, then they won't just ignore something that says parking permit. They'll act on the one that shows they need to act on the one. Anybody have an inbox that's gotten away on you lately? Or is it just me? Feels like I want to blame it on COVID, but I don't know. I can't blame it on COVID. Again, in your strengthened professional writing skills, being mindful of your salutations. So how are you addressing someone, and in what context is it for? Now, if I worked with Joseph and I was also his friend, I might say, hi, Joe, I changed our lunch reservation to this, because I'm only talking about lunch. But if I'm talking with Joe about a project and we're buddy-buddy, I probably would still say, Joseph, comma, attached is XYZ report. because I don't know where Joseph is going to take that. That might move on and be forwarded or shared in some other capacity, or it might become a formal document. Now, none of us want legal issues in our workplace. That's not fun. But that's a little bit of a thing in the back of the mind. You don't know exactly which emails become historical records. What if Joseph ends up being a serial killer and you didn't know? All your email correspondence with him about a topic or a project fails at work or whatever. Everything surrounding that topic becomes a part of a legal historical record. So if it's the formal pieces that actually have to do with work, there's no harm in calling someone by their proper name or even their title, Dear President, or however those in your company wish to be addressed. A lot of people with PhD, they strongly prefer you use doctor in the salutation, even if you're friends. So be mindful of that and what matters in your workplace. Now, there's always an opening statement. That's talked about on page 7 of your workbooks. And in example land, let's just take a moment. I'll give you a second just to read these before I comment on it. So this is like the gift on the golden platter also in terms of a direct opening. Because the indirect opening says to me, hey, what you're about to read is a bunch of legalese and policies, and you could be awake or half asleep, it doesn't matter. But a more direct opening says, hey, Rochelle, there's a reason I've sent this email to you, and there's action you need to take before time runs out. So that's your gift you're giving to a reader, is being really direct when you open about what kind of outcome or expectation is attached to the communique. And when you're dealing with lots of details, this is a simple one. And in the responses that came back to me with that corrected email, our homework from last week, a lot of you caught on to this right away. You saw that I need to create space in an email. I need to put things in columns or lists, and it helps the reader be able to see and manage information. Now, these are two different topics. So the first one, as it relates to dates, names, and cities, we can easily organize that in an email. The second one is one giant long sentence, which I might be tempted to write myself, but even if you keep it in a sentence and you don't move it into bulleted points, you could also break it up with your ABC type of listings or 1, 2, 3s. And we do this a lot verbally, right? How many of you with emoji, how many of you say this when you're speaking? You might say, I notice there's a window behind me right now in my camera view, and that bothers me for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's bright. Number 2, it's making my camera a little blurry. So we do this verbally, right? Where we itemize things. Do you do that out loud? As you write, you can incorporate the same thing where you itemize things with lists, numbers, and letters without even breaking them down into a list. You could do it right within a sentence. I had to throw this one in there because I often get asked if I'm American because I love to say the word y'all. I just made a joke about it in this morning's webinar too, actually. But contractions can be very difficult in professional writing. It's the one thing that I hope you take away from today. Look at how often y'all, which is a contraction, are using contractions. Are you taking 2 words and putting them together? Now, words like it's, will, that's, they're really, really common, and they're acceptable in professional speech where we can say them and it doesn't sort of devalue our message or our credibility. But when we put it in writing, it does. It's very tempting to write with scads of contractions. And my encouragement to you would be to say, how can I limit those? And you would be amazed in your editing process. When you focus on contractions and you split words apart, it suddenly helps you edit down the rest of the sentence. Because as you make those that one word, 2 words, let's take the example of isn't. As soon as you split that to be is not, you read your sentence in a much more intelligent way and you realize there's other words I can throw out of here as I've expanded is not. So focusing on contractions is actually a great proofreading tool that I'd love you to take away from today, because if you just got rid of contractions in your emails, you already would raise them up a notch. Now, again, there's informal email. So referring back to the example I gave you about Carrie and I can email her and I could say, hey, Carrie, it's about to snow here. I won't be able to meet you. So it's and won't, those are okay in those informal peer-to-peer emails. But, you know, the what up dog, hey homie, hey y'all, I can't, I'll, will, don't, won't, hasn't, those are sort of inappropriate for written correspondence. So ask yourself, what parts of my email need to be formal and which parts need to be informal? Well, my opening, it could be informal. That might be the place I'm bringing in my warmth and creating rapport with someone. When I'm referring to previous emails and so on and stating the purpose, there's an expected level of formality in emails. So we don't say, hey, I got some attachment and I'm attaching it for y'all there. We usually say, please find attached blah, blah, blah document, right? So you can see that in your practice already, there's parts of email that you automatically make formal because that's just what you've seen done. So here's a link for you where this will actually give you practical sentences. If you want just 2 or 3 examples for each of these on how to give a promising action in a formal tone that makes your email sound credible, this is a great link to use that'll actually give you those sentences word for word, and you can just throw them into your email life. So bringing us down to page 8 in our workbook, tips and tricks regarding writing. We want to put that call to action first. We want people to know, is there something they have to do in response to this email or not? In terms of retrieving a sent email, we want to think about whether am I responding to something they already sent or am I creating a new conversation? So recognize you don't always reply to the email that came in. You may create a new thread if it's about something else. Or don't create a new thread if you're answering someone, because they're going to be scrambling looking for their sent email. Is anything you write a permanent record? Yeah, pretty much. So is what you're writing something that could be posted on the bulletin board? So keep that bulletin board rule in the back of your mind that some entry-level person who's trying to be helpful, they're just going to take your email and print it out exactly how it is, and they're going to tack it up in the staff room for everyone to read it, and they think they've been helpful. So just give yourself that bulletin board rule in the back of your mind. 24-hour rule about anything that's charged with emotion or is highly technical writing. So like Annie said, you're going away from it, you're separating yourself from it and coming back to it the next day. Please, if you're at all angry about an issue, you have to do the 24-hour rule. It'll save your bacon. I hate the next one, consistent email address, because I'm kind of bad for that. I email out of a couple different email addresses for whatever reason, and so I'm sorry. This is my confession to all the people who work with me. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But that's something in the workplace to think about. You might be the info at person and also your name. So just recognizing which customers and clients need you to reply from the info at email and so on. If you're doing something big, don't open your email program. Open Microsoft Word or open Google Docs and type out your whole thing in a document. You don't have to even save it. But in doing that, you're going to be able to see the page view on what it looks like. You're going to be able to use the spell check tools, the formatting tools, and it's just a beautiful way to then just copy or cut and paste that into an email. Grammarly, some people tend to like that tool. And then have your own list of what your hurdle words are. Maybe it's a colleague's name. Maybe it's someone named Lisa, but they spell it like Liza, and it's pronounced Lisa. So you always have a hard time remembering to use a Z instead of an S. Put your hurdle wordle, that would be a good book title. Put that up on a note so that you're focusing on your hurdles. Keeping your word count down, take a look. How many words do you usually get in a reasonable email? It's not that many. So you might want to give yourself a limit. Removing the to. This is one of the biggest things that's going to save your life, especially if you're working on an emotionally charged email or something that deals with numbers and technical data. I encourage you to almost never start the email process with the to line. In fact, I think that Microsoft should take to and put it at the bottom of the whole function so that before you hit the send button is when you fill in the blank of who that email is going to. I would love to see that change made because it would save us from many erroneous moments of hitting send too soon or sending to the wrong people. So please leave that blank, formulate your whole email, and then go back and add the to in. On your privacy and your BCC, one of your tips and tricks, this isn't about writing skills as much as professionalism. Be mindful who should get blind copied on something and who shouldn't. I was actually just telling Carrie this last week. I emailed a colleague a comment about a project they were working on. It was kind, it was nothing embarrassing. It was just a technical thing. I answered them. Well, they took my email and forwarded it to a whole group and added their own comments. And I just thought, man, that's bad email etiquette, because clearly my comment to them was only intended to them, and they went ahead and forwarded it to everyone else. So be really mindful of your practices on not only maintaining your own privacy, but of those who emailed you. It's a big no-no to alter an original message. Now, last session, we did look at how you can take a big giant email with lots of bullet points and you can answer each bullet point as it goes. That's okay, but absolutely not. In fact, I think I can't say it's like against the law, but it's sort of against the law. You cannot change the original message. So if you email me and then I hit reply, I could type my whole reply in, but I may not go into the body of your email and change certain words to make it appear as though you said something you didn't. So that's a big no-no. Even highlighting it and underlining it as you forward it on to someone else, you've changed that original text, and you need to be really careful about that because you're basically misquoting someone. Auto signature, go ahead and add that in. Lots of companies add a privacy statement. And then one little trick is in your subject line, if you keep the little icons out of it, you'll have a better chance getting into people's inboxes. So lots of companies, firewalls and spam filters won't let an email get to the person if it has any kind of weird symbols or even punctuation symbols within the subject line. So avoiding a colon or a plus sign helps you get around some filters if you find that that's a problem. I see a question from Annie. Do I email the client to request permission to ask questions via this email address? I don't fully understand the question, so I'm going to speak to that for a moment, Annie, and then you can let me know your thoughts on that. Clarifying which email address can be key, especially if you know that the person has sent you something maybe from their business email, and maybe they've requested a personal service, but you can tell it's a company email. Absolutely, my first response might be to answer them back and say, I'd love to answer your questions. Is this the best email address to reach you at? It's not dissimilar from asking what's the best phone number to reach someone at. So yeah, I love that. Great professional practice to do that. If you find you're quick on the send button and then you're the one going later, oh, I forgot to send the attachment, or oh, I forgot to include someone in the carbon copy line, or Oh, I didn't proofread that. Take a Post-it note. I keep one on my computer. See this? I keep it. It was stuck right up here on my screen. I keep it on my computer, and I use it for a few different reasons, but this would be one of them. If I know I'm writing a really important email and I do not want to hit send, I'll take the Post-it note and I'll cover up the send button so that before I can even do that, I have to pause and think about it. So if you're working on high confidential, high detail email, or you're really nervous, or you're applying for a job or something like that, please, the Post-it note will save your life. Don't be an over important person. Not everything you send is high importance. So feel free to just keep it on your normal setting as the default setting, and then only be using the high importance when you have to, or you will be like the boy who cried wolf. The great thing about mentioning attachments now is that a lot of our email programs catch that, right? They know that when we are sending an attachment, we've referred to it, and it will sometimes flag it for us. But you can always do that Post-it note as soon as you're typing the email and you think, oh, I got to attach something. Grab that Post-it note on your screen and stick it down over the send button so that you know mentally, that's like the rope on the finger. You know mentally, I have to do something before I hit send. Stop what you're writing about, attach it right away. You can always take your mouse away too, a little harder to do on a laptop, but on your PC, throw your mouse out of reach so that you're just focused on what you're writing and you're not hitting the send button until you're done. I do love the programs that warn us saying, didn't you mean to attach something? That's handy. You can always do the preview function to make sure you have the right attachment. So in most programs, that just means double clicking on the attachment that you did attach, and it opens it in a little window so you can see that you sent the right thing. And then of course, attaching it before you even write anything would be the best practice. So I love that. And yes, don't add the email addresses until you're done. That is your biggest takeaway from this whole thing. Avoid the two-line. Make that your last resort when you're sending an email. There's lots of Netiquette rules and they continue to grow and change. Copying everybody's ugly. We talked about that last time. And especially if you're replying, don't turn it into a chat room by replying to an entire carbon copied list. There is some stuff in your workbook about websites, about sending spam and checking things and so on. So be mindful of that. Jokes seem like a good idea. They always do, but they're never a good idea, actually. Watching our capital letters, asking for permission before forwarding. This is a huge Netiquette thing that is never in an employee manual. Nobody tells you this. It's not written down. But it's assumed that if you use email for communication, you know that you don't forward emails without the person's express permission. Similarly, you're not altering what they've put into a message. And then, of course, responding on time. And that can be as simple as saying, I can't respond to this. I'll let you know. I got an email like this last week. I asked someone for a document and they said, I'm not going to be able to get to this until the end of the month. I'll email you sometime later in November. Well, at least I know they read the email, right? So that's helpful. Keeping one subject line per email is beautiful. Being mindful of tone, of course, and then personal use. Just the little disclaimer is that your company can see everything you send. So not really wanting to use your work email for personal use if you can at all avoid it. Now we are going to look at how email gets affected during crisis, but first Carrie's going to moderate for us. We just invite you to put into the chat some of the helpful tools that you've received in this training. So there's workplace training as it relates specifically to email. And we just wondered if you could pop that in the chat and let us know, was there a tip you took away from this? Is there a particular thing you learned? Let us know here with one or two sentences what you might put away in your toolbox.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, watching contractions, I think that's a big one. What else did we gather from the past 2 sessions? Yeah, that's definitely one I use as well, to read out loud from the bottom up. It can really help with those, catching those 2, 2, and 2s and the there's. Yes, the Post-it note trick is such a great idea, isn't it? Now, guys, I hope I have time. I don't know, Rochelle kind of just said I could take over, didn't she?
Absolutely.
And, I think moderate was the word. But anyway, I wanted to tell you guys about this awful example of watching who you're sending your emails to. So long time ago, back in a different land, there was some conflict in the workplace. And there was one particular employee that seemed to be taking a lot of heat from the boss, despite the fact that this person really wasn't doing anything abnormal, was keeping up with their work, and yet the boss seemed, whenever anything went wrong, seemed to pick on this person. One day the boss was away, and there was a group of people, you know, gathered around the water cooler. There wasn't a water cooler, but you guys know what I mean. And it was an email. So one member of the team sent an email to another member of the team and said, I don't understand why the boss is picking on this person. It seems really unfair. Their behavior, the boss's behavior, is erratic. You never really know what you're coming into. It's creating a really awful work environment, like all this negative stuff about the boss. And you know what happened, guys, don't you? Yeah. Instead of sending it to the colleague, this person sent it to the boss. So what do? After you wipe up the lower back sweats and the perspiration from your forehead, what had happened was this person went to the general manager, the big boss, and said, here's what I've done. And I'm sure some of you have heard me tell this story before. Thank you for your patience. Brought in IT, had the email retracted pretty much as the boss was coming into the workplace. Everybody is like sitting on pins and needles, wondering what's going to happen, because there were erratic behaviors from this boss. And person logs in and says, hey, is anybody else having problems with their email? Mine seems to be acting kind of weird. It's a bit slow. The rest of the team in cubicle land shouts, oh, gee, no, I haven't noticed anything. And honest to goodness, it was awful. So I know for myself, I try really hard with that too, to leave it blank, even though it's the first thing, like you said, it's the first thing that we see. So what do? We want to pop it in there. Hold back, my friends. Hold back.
That is awesome. Don't you think Microsoft should be listening to us and implement our idea to move the to line to the bottom? Like, seriously, how come Bill Gates isn't listening to this right now? Thank you for sharing some of those tips that you've included, because that's really what we want to hear, to make sure we're giving meaningful content, not just to you today, but to future learners also. Thank you for that. And then I guess one heads up is that you will get asked this question again. So usually just a couple months after workshop takes place, you get a phone call from Workplace Education Manitoba. Sometimes it's an email, and they'll ask you, what was your takeaway or highlight, or do you have any things you want to tell us, or how did Rochelle do, or whatever. Don't worry, it's not me who makes the call, so you can be brutally honest. Now, when the rules change, crises happen, n'est-ce pas? They do all the time. We're in them right now. So we're in this era right now that people actually have like a Zoom fatigue, because they have to do everything online. And there can be email fatigue that's so easily created in a crisis, because people are quickly trying to figure out, what do we do? How to respond to this? Everybody weigh in. And then we get exhausted over a topic because it's all happened by email. Watch your chain of command. This was like my big oof when I was early in my career. I had no concept of chain of command, and I would just go right to the top sometimes to ask a question. Or I would go to like a peer's boss and present something. I didn't even present it to the peer yet. Ugh, I wish there would have been a webinar for me back then. But people are gracious and they helped me understand. But chain of command, especially in a crisis, is so critical, because you have no idea who your supervisor is connecting with to try to manage the crisis. And maybe there's other tentacles of it that don't affect your job. So you better keep your funnel going this way with who's in your chain of command before you reach this way, and not skipping a step, because it might actually be that a middle manager is the one who's been tasked with gathering everything. Now, I love to give the example of Rudy Giuliani. He was the mayor of New York, and that happened, 9/11 happened during his time as a leader. So he actually left his office and went straight to ground zero, and he was down there with all the first responders dealing with what was happening. So in that type of crisis, we want to be really thoughtful about who the chain of command is, because even if I previously used to email the mayor directly, while he may be the one to make a decision on it, in a crisis like 9/11, I'm probably going to email his assistant. Very rarely, I'm going to be thoughtful about that, but I'm probably going to email his assistant instead and say, as you vet all the communication, here's something I would like the mayor to see. Now, the timing of when you send these things is critical, because if an emergency broke out and you didn't report on it on time, that would be a thing. If you had an important detail about a crisis, you do want to get that logged right away. And also the other way, holding back so that people dealing with crisis don't have to waste their time with unnecessary emails. So even sending an email saying, this can wait till next week, but, well, then wait till next week. Keep it in your draft folder, okay? And don't send it, because you're essentially asking somebody to take their attention off of the crisis and read something that they don't even need to read until a week from now. So do not clutter. Tons of legalities and liabilities when the emergencies happen. So before just stating something passionately, think about what's the impact of this, because maybe a crisis happened and somebody, God forbid, died in your facility. Well, what are the legalities surrounding the incident report of that and all the documentation around it? And are you allowed to speak to it? Did you sign some type of confidentiality that told you to not speak about certain issues in the workplace? Well, putting those in writing are a problem, but especially during a crisis, because your judgment might be a little bit altered. Consider the state that you're in and the recipient. So is the recipient the main line person dealing with a crisis? Maybe there's some thoughtfulness about what we should and shouldn't be sending them and when. And do I know anything about their capacity right now? Do I know anything about their adrenal glands being in overdose because they've been on adrenaline for 3 weeks straight dealing with an emergency, or in our case, maybe 6 months straight dealing with a pandemic? So let me take that into account and consider what I'm sending, because remember, shared understanding's the goal. So I don't want to just offload information. I want to give someone helpful communication, and that bears in mind their capacity. So is this a fair and reasonable time to be presenting that? Could it wait? And will this push them to the edge of capacity, or can I save for them a little bit of margin where they don't have to deal with this, or I can compile 10 emails into one report and give it to them in a really tidy way. So if you're a team leader, this is a great thing to think about in a crisis, is that you can gather and harvest all of the emails from your team, and then you can vet them, edit them, and put them in a way that your supervisor has the capacity to hear it. Instead of 10 emails, they've got one report from a team. Those things are really just underscoring the concept that there's no such thing as a quick email in a crisis, because every little thing does add up. Recognizing that in that zone, time is money. So if the average person's spending hours and hours a day on email, we definitely want to alleviate that in a crisis. And we talked about this last time. I hope you jotted it down. I like to throw this slide in right at the end so that we remember that in our professional communication, we don't have to send a lot of emails when they don't fit one of these categories. So if your email doesn't check all the boxes here, then that's probably the one. You could just keep as a draft. That's all to say thank you for joining us today. And of course, I have in fine print there, it's hard to see, but why is this guy so happy at his computer? Well, because he knows how to find out about all of our workshops. That's why he's so happy. So there's the website for you. Don't you love that his cup sort of matches our logo? He's a real cool cat, this guy. So there's our website. You can see in the coming weeks, we're going to be announcing our 2021 workshops. You don't want to miss those. There will be a deeper writing workshop, I think, and lots of professional training that Carrie's doing. I want you to be a part of that. And like I say, you probably will get a follow-up call or email in a few months. But with that, I thank you. And I'll pass you back to Carrie. Thank you so much for joining in today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. You know we love it. And for the emojis. And Rochelle, of course, for your infinite wisdom when it comes to creating amazing emails. Go forth and be awesome, my friends. Have a great week. Take care.